This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I'd like to welcome Harriet Suchet to the show.
Yeah, good morning. And I'm not on serious drugs like I was yesterday. You called me and I don't remember half of the conversation.
Oh, well, it was a good one. I can tell you that. we had some interesting conversations because we just saw on the news yesterday that Trump has ordered the JFK, RFK, and MLK files declassified, which for me is extremely exciting. I'm sure that it's taken this long. He was supposed to have done it in his first term. 8 years later, he has now actively put that in effect, and those files are ordered to be released within 15 days. That is going to be the longest 2 weeks of my life. I don't know what I'm excited about because it's likely to be heavily redacted, but I'm hoping that there are still bits and pieces that we can use from that to help put some of these puzzle pieces together. Now, this goes along with what Harriet said.
Well, that's what I was just going to say really quickly. It's going to be like some of what we've already seen, where it looks like it's redacted and it's official. Then you decode it and it says something else with certain names supposed to be redacted. Anyways, right. So it's going to be very interesting.
Well, I also found that interesting in light of, didn't we have some other items that were released right after Carter passed away? So Jimmy Carter passed away.
Like the next day in Europe, their whole classified who helped the Nazis and things, mainly in Europe, but that would obviously be connections to the United States, Canada, anywhere. They released it the next day.
Right. So your solve said that all of this information that Carter was involved with and these solves that you're coming up with that indicates that the Zodiac is making direct contact with Carter, all of this was supposed to be revealed once he and the Zodiac had passed away. So we're starting to see some of that information actually spill out. I mean, we've long since waited for this information on JFK, RFK, and MLK. So we'll finally get to see, hopefully, what the investigation entailed and who they were looking at and where they really think that this whole entire escapade was perpetrated by. I did see that there was a gentleman who had found a bullet behind JFK's back in the car. He picked it up and supposedly put it onto a gurney. I was a little confused by the article because it first said it was on Connolly's gurney, but then he stated that he had put it on JFK's gurney. So that would actually disprove the single bullet theory, which most of us, if you own guns, you never believed that single bullet theory to begin with. But had you heard about that, Harriet?
Years ago. Mm-hmm.
And I'm catching up. I really don't know anything about these files.
Just like you said, it would disprove the single bullet theory. So they kind of like, well, we'll put it on Connolly.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think that the whole premise that the Zodiac even wrote a communication in regards to the JFK shooting, which case was a letter we talked about way back in 1963 that was mailed to the Dallas Police Department. And we know that that's the Zodiac's handwriting, and how he has this inside information is really kind of one of those things that made me think that he was with the syndicate or with the mob or with somebody who had that inside information that would be able to say, link Ruby to Oswald. And then, of course, we know that Oswald was shot inside the police department by Ruby, who was able to get a gun in there. And the letter literally said, link these two together. And then we have Ruby actually killing Oswald. So there's something there. There definitely is. All right. So back to
well, I just wanted to interject quickly. That's where Mel Belli comes in. He saw that on TV and said that he saw that Ruby had shot him, but it was 45, 50 minutes later that he died at the hospital. So they said it was the hospital's fault. So Ruby
for
shot
Oswald?
him, so it would be kind of a, yeah.
I see that Nolan's here. Let's welcome him to
Ruby-
the show because he's really good on this history stuff. Nolan, are you with us? ...
Good morning, Nolan.
I see that he's in the studio, but I don't see his presence on screen. His camera and mic are off. If you can hear us, Nolan, turn on your camera and your mic.
Okay, there it is.
Blink once for yes and blink twice.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Have you heard what we've been talking about?
Okay. Just Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald.
Well, we started with the fact that Trump just declassified the JFK, MLK, and RFK files.
Interesting.
Right? I thought you were going to be on this one.
Yeah, no, I knew he did it, but I don't know. I'm sure they're going to be redacted.
Oh, of course, they'll be
reveal the truth, the full truth.
No,
but
well,
maybe they'll do some helpful tidbits.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So they have 15 days to do that. It'll be the longest 2 weeks of my life waiting for where we're going to be able to find these things. And of course, we were just cross-referencing some of the stuff. Like I'd said, we're going to be able to pull bits and pieces out of it. Even though they think they've redacted stuff, there's ultimately going to be some type of information in there that could help put some of these puzzle pieces together. And since the Zodiac did, in fact, write a letter in regards to JFK's assassination and putting together the link between Ruby and Oswald, and then we had Ruby who killed Oswald in the police department where he was able to shot him in the police department where he was able to access Oswald, and he had a gun on him, is not just a coincidence that the Zodiac was attempting to say that there was a link there. And then as Harriet was just mentioning, that Melvin Belli picked up the case, correct, for Ruby?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and then we have
he saw Ruby shoot him, but he dies 45, 50 minutes later at the hospital. So he said that's where the hospital could have saved him. It was only just a minute away from the hospital.
Hello, Harriet.
So that's where Belli took over.
We lost you there.
Hello.
What was that?
I don't know why I'm having Can you hear me now?
You're cutting in and out.
My computer's
I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah. I don't know what to do. Should I go out and come back in?
That sounded fine right there. I don't know if that was just a momentary blurb or what. But needless to say, so we have Melvin Belli, who then attempts to represent Jack Ruby in the shooting of Oswald, who supposedly assassinates the president. And then we have the Zodiac turning around and writing Melvin Belli directly. So this is too much, guys. There's too much of a weave here that's going on. But I'm gonna take us back to the finale of the Atlanta, Georgia child murder cases and some of the FOIA file information that I had pulled out, so we can quickly get through this topic and move on. So basically, I found a criminal investigative division informative note on March 3rd of 1982 in the ATKID Major Case 30, Atlanta. It says attached Atlanta teletype advises that on 3/1/82, a meeting was held at the Atlanta Police Task Force headquarters with representatives from all affected law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies present. After much discussion, it was concluded that Wayne Williams could be linked to 23 of the task force victims, which includes victims Cater and Payne. District Attorney Lewis Slayton advised he will recommend to the district attorneys who have jurisdiction over these cases that they be officially closed. The remaining 7 cases as set forth in the attached teletype will be turned over to the appropriate jurisdictions. It was unanimously agreed upon that the task force be disbanded effective 3/8 of 1982. So basically, after a 9-week trial for Wayne Williams, who was legitimately caught dumping 2 adult bodies over the bridge, I believe. Is that correct, Harriet?
That's what I'm understanding.
So somehow they have now...
Sorry, I'm trying to get up.
Oh, okay.
So I may have to mute. I have to mute you for 30 seconds, okay?
Not a problem. All right. So
me?
anyways, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, I've lost my picture, but I guess I can hear you fine.
Right? You're still
yeah.
on. Huh.
Okay.
Very crazy. Well, at any rate, my whole idea behind this is they stated they could link 23 of the victims, but the other 7 were returned to the original jurisdiction of the murder. If they believed that these individuals were all killed by the same person and they couldn't link 7 of them to Wayne Williams, then isn't it more of a I can't I lost my train of thought now.
Multiple killers, I think. More than one person involved in the killings.
Well, but he was caught dumping 2 adult bodies. That has no relation to child killings.
Children, right? Yeah.
Right. And
they never arrested anyone else.
No, they specifically did not look at anybody else. And so for these other 7 cases that they've referred back to local jurisdiction that remain unsolved, they literally closed these cases without ever even trying Wayne Williams for him. And they closed him on him as if he was the murderer. And we were all supposed to just accept that. So that to me is just another one of law enforcement's dirty deeds. To close cases on people who are innocent, which we're going to be doing a show here soon on my client who has been incarcerated for more than 30 years in regards to a murder he didn't commit. Okay. Because once law enforcement sinks their teeth into somebody, they don't want to let go. They're like pit bulls. They're just going to keep pressing their issue and their agenda without actively investigating and doing what they should be doing. So it goes on March 12th of 1982 with another communication came in from a anonymous person. They don't say who it is here, but it says inklet dated 3/9 of 82. Subject writes in and believes that Wayne Williams is innocent of the Atlanta murders, alleges that the Atlanta PD and FBI are covering something up. He alleges that the killings are part of a voodoo Masonic Kabbalistic ritual since oil was found on parts of the bodies of the victims. That's an interesting take because in one of my conversations with Tim Miller and the loss of his daughter, his main suspect was somebody heavily involved in the oil industry. So we do, and we have been talking about oil and its relation to those that are involved throughout this process over the last 40, 50 years now. Well, at least up till 1981. So it was interesting to see somebody else say that there was oil found on the parts of the bodies of the victims. I don't have enough information on this case to determine, was it because of where they were dumped, that they came into contact with oil, but they're saying on several. So when they say bodies, there's more than one that has oil on them and they think that that's a link somehow. So this must have been information that was out there in the public for just some anonymous person to write in about.
But also part of a ritual. And a lot of times law enforcement is either protecting people or their law enforcement officers involved.
Yeah.
Correct.
Affiliated.
Correct.
Involved, directly involved. If you look
and
at
we're going to
California State.
Sitting on it now.
Who got convicted in Sacramento. He was a former cop.
Yeah.
Right. And
look at the Son of Sam.
Okay.
Killings. The cops.
Harriet, you need to mute yourself.
What was that?
You need to mute yourself. You've got too much background noise going on and it's interrupting and taking minutes away from the limited time.
Yeah,
okay.
I can mute you.
Thank you. All right. So go ahead, Nolan.
Okay. I was also saying in the Son of Sam murders, both the district attorney's office and the police department fumbled and bumbled and And then they finally found one guy, blamed him for all the killings when there were multiple people involved. So it's weird how terrible the police work is when it comes to a lot of these murders.
It's like they attempt to just close whatever they can close on somebody, whether it's right or not, because they just want to be seen as having done their job. And we're going to be talking about that with Henry Lee Lucas and O'Toole. And then, of course, as you were mentioning in The Son of Sam, the investigative reporter who was looking into those cases and believed that more than one person was involved, he attempted to run some stories on the Martin Luther King events that occurred after his assassination, and the media that he was actively working with and wanted the story told through discarded his story and truth about, the fires and the riots and the streets burning up and the disarray that occurred after the assassination of MLK. And they basically shut that story down and made it sound like everything was roses and peaches, Yeah. So yes, media's right there behind them. In the John Ramsey case, when I watched that docuseries, there they were vilifying and crucifying the Ramseys, the Ramseys, with the media, and all the while they were wrong withholding evidence. And we're going to see a lot of that in this case that I'm going to do with you, Nolan, and San Joaquin Valley Transparency. So to continue on with this particular, and I have to reiterate that one of the victims in the ATKID cases called home and said that she was picked up and offered a ride home by a nice white man, but they stopped at his house first and gave her an opportunity to call home. So I'm sorry, but I think it was an 8-year-old child that made this call home. If she was being told to lie, to say it's a white man when it's really a black man that's picked her up, I think that there would have been some duress in her voice. There would be some stress because she's being asked to purposely lie about some scenario in which she was feeling safe in. And if she was feeling safe because this white man was nice, it's highly unlikely that you were going to get her to lie to her parents in regards to who this individual is. But the fact that they've actually, convicted, well, they didn't convict Wayne Williams. Here's the whole entire issue and why I'm going over this information. They did not try these cases at all. And only 23 out of, it looks like 30 victims could be associated to Wayne Williams. And maybe that's exactly what they were attempting to do, was to take Wayne Williams down. Again, like a patsy, like Arthur Lee Allen, let's point the evidence towards that person. And then to not even try him for the cases and to close the cases out. To me, it's a disgusting abuse of the justice system.
He was a scapegoat.
Completely. So on March 29th of 1982, to the Honorable William H. Webster, Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United States Department of Justice. Dear Judge Webster, if you guys remember that this is the same judge that was on the Wayne Williams case, he had actively placed a gag order on anybody in regards to speaking to any media or otherwise in regards to the case, which to me, again, is absolutely odd. You've got a major American travesty that has occurred, and you want to put a gag order so that we can't hear the evidence or know what's going on. So this is actually being written to Judge Webster, and this is from Lewis R. Slayton, which is the District Attorney, Atlanta Judicial Circuit. It says, I appreciate...
Webster later head of the
What's
FBI?
That?
Wasn't Webster later the head of the FBI?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So that's why they say that they believed that the FBI was helping to conceal or cover up the actual acts of this particular crime. So I appreciate very much your taking time from your busy schedule to write about the prosecution of Wayne Williams and your kind words. Whatever success we achieved in that case would not have been possible without the splendid assistance of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Now, I know, because we just got done reading last week a FOIA file in which case they're being heavily questioned about their inability to work together, why the task force, why they didn't show up sooner. Like, there was all these why, because the FBI didn't do their job, to now the wonderful, splendid work of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Is that the wonderful work that we can expect from them? Is that they're going to close cases without a trial on somebody and then never, ever have the real evidence in those particular cases heard by the public? So, okay, splendid, FBI. Let's see.
That's where I find myself. I really think that they need to hold, especially since Carter's gone, a new trial for Wayne Williams. I mean, two obviously doesn't mean 80. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So, yes. Two does not, and two adults, not children, does not mean 30 children.
Exactly.
So maybe our plight needs to be to Trump after he declassifies this stuff, that he hops on board of this case and reopens it for a true investigation. Either way, so let's see here. Go ahead, Nolan.
FBI went up after the wrong guy with the, was it the Olympics or something? Some big event was going on. There was a backpack, explosives, and they got the wrong guy. I think
that was the Olympics.
Richard Jewell.
Yeah.
Richard Jewell.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
That was Atlanta, too. They botched that.
Well, so he says, my very special thanks go to the FBI laboratory in Atlanta. Laboratory? Why the laboratory? You guys did not do anything that connected these murders that you closed the cases on.
Why would you close them when nobody's been convicted?
Exactly. So, and professional.
Myself again.
What's that? See,
was that
she's muted.
I think she was muting myself again for a minute. But
okay. All right. Let's keep moving. Just mute yourself when that happens. I believe in a shining example of federal, state, and local teamwork to solve a difficult problem. With kindness, personal regards, I remain yours truly, Gordon H. Miller, Assistant District Attorney. So that just completely is contradicting the last memo that we read, in which case they weren't cooperating, they weren't working together, they didn't step in when they should, and they were being questioned left and right. And until that gag order was released, I don't believe any of those questions were allowed to be answered, and that's what that particular communication had stated. So let's hear it for the splendid FBI. Let's see. Oh. Here's the gag order. Evidently, I hadn't read that yet. So, Mr. Thomas F. Keller, Assistant Director of the FBI Laboratory. And so this is coming from Lewis R. Slayton again. And it says, Dear Mr. Keller, Special Agent blank, I don't know, redacted, inquired about our policy with regard to talking with the media about the Wayne Williams case now that the trial is over. While we certainly do not in any way purport to dictate to the FBI what its policy should be, our policy is offered only for your consideration. The gag order that was imposed by the trial judge ended when the defendant was sentenced. However, since we do not want to say anything publicly that might adversely affect the appeal or unnecessarily incite the community, we have made it a policy not to speak publicly about any evidence connecting Williams to any other victims except those named in the indictment. So they're refusing to discuss the 30 children, just the two people, the two adults.
Right.
They don't want any information about the evidence connecting him in the indictment and those used during the trial as similar transactions. We will also refuse comment on any other potential suspects which may have been developed during the course of the investigation. So they're also going to keep that hush-hush. They don't want anybody to know about other suspects. Right. In summary, our public comments have been restricted to the evidence introduced at the trial itself. Trusting that this may be of some value to you, I remain with kindest personal regards, yours truly, Gordon H. Miller, once again.
I mean,
all of that.
Even looking for anyone else? I mean, there had to be so much clues and evidence implicating other suspects.
Well, they clearly had other suspects, and they decided they weren't even going to investigate it. And that's really where the controversy comes in this case, because you've got some pretty pissed off parents. In fact, let's see, from the House of Representatives, let's see if I can figure out, Mildred Glover, Representative District 22. So basically, from the House of Representatives, this letter comes forth to William Bradford Reynolds, Assistant Attorney General, Civil Rights Division. It says, Dear Mr. Reynolds, after a 9-week trial in early 1982, Wayne Williams was convicted and sentenced for the murder of 2 adults in the Atlanta child killings. Subsequent to his conviction, local authorities announced that 22 children cases which appear to be related would also be closed. Not one of the closed cases were brought to trial. Parents of the children, first bewildered by the investigative treatment given their children's murder and enraged at the knowledge that the conviction of Williams for 2 murders would suffice for all of them, sought my assistance for justice beyond the state of Georgia. They contend that their children were killed because they were Black and that they themselves have been treated as second-class citizens in their effort to seek relief because they too are poor and Black. Furthermore, their opinions are substantiated by extensive testimony in the form of written and recorded information which provided names, dates, and places suggesting a racist intent in the children's murders. It is against this background that and who would be racist? This would bring us back to it being a white perpetrator.
Right, or a group of white perpetrators.
Right. Either way, it doesn't scream a Black man is doing this, which is who they pinned these murders on.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
It says, it is against this background that the parents and I entered into regular and lengthy discussions of missing and murdered children. The children lived or were last seen or were found. I consider it an important stewardship responsibility to respond to the parents in their request. After a careful study and review of the information, I'm led to believe that the parents' contention that discrimination was the motive in their children's death is indeed a valid one. It is in the parents' behalf that I write this letter to present the case of discrimination in the Atlanta child killings, that the children were killed because of color. Evidence strongly suggests that the children's rights have been violated. Further, I am charging that there's hole punches through my words, and indifferent treatment accorded the children's death by law enforcement officials, and the inadequate and insensitive response to parents is proof positive that they were ignored because of color. It is fair to assume that our government leaders would have declared a state of emergency and conceivably a state of war had the 30 victims been white, slain en masse, and virtually ignored by law enforcement officials. In my response to the parents to seek justice beyond the state of Georgia, I appeal to you under Title 9 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Section 902, which authorizes the intervention of the United States government in civil rights cases. It states, whenever an action has been commenced in any court of the United States seeking relief from the denial of equal protection of the laws under the 14th Amendment to the Constitution on account of race, color, religion, or national origin, the Attorney General for and in the same name of the United States may intervene in such action upon timely application if the Attorney General certifies that the case is of general public importance. In such action, the United States shall be entitled to the same relief as it had instituted the action. So she gives a general overview of the information that the parents have relayed to her in regards to what they know about the cases. And that overview really kind of screams that there's definitely something else going on here. And they just wanted to kind of hush this up and push it under and blame it on Wayne Williams. In the general overview.
On a side note regarding that Title IX stuff and the civil rights enforcement, Trump just basically put on paid leave everyone that's in charge of doing that type of enforcement.
What?
It was in today's B. He put them on paid leave with the intention of laying them off or firing them. He's trying to disband that part of the federal government.
Really?
Rights enforcement. Yeah. There's an article in today's B about it.
So what's the purpose for doing that?
Because he doesn't care about civil rights.
So you're saying he's a good old white boy, racist?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, yeah, if you're going to do away with that whole entire sector of the federal government that's supposed to protect everyone in right.
It's like rewriting the law. You know, it's going beyond his authority, to tell you the truth. But that's what he did. It's in the B today.
and I often wonder, I mean, I understand that at a certain point in our history, we definitely needed somebody to handle and man these type of situations and events. But the reality is that we are so mixed now as a culture. Does white people fall into that civil rights stuff? You know, I mean,
yes.
are we okay? So I'm just trying to make sure that it's fair and across the board for everyone, because you
It
hear
is
about
for everyone. Yes.
you hear about they have their day, they have their day, they have their day, but where's your National White Day?
All day, every day.
I just think that we should all be treated equally and fairly, given all the same considerations, period, across the board.
Right.
So in the general overview, it says, during the summer of 1979, a crisis of unparalleled proportions came to light in Atlanta, Georgia, that was to continue for the next 2 years. Black children and young adults were murdered in massive numbers. The murderers of unknown identity stalked the streets of the city, snatching and killing our children and dropping their bodies along highways, byways, and in rivers. Now, these are all signs of Zodiac 101, highways, byways, and rivers. So waterway dumps we've been talking about just for eons now, and freeway drops, absolutely 100. So during the period, a total of 30 young persons were identified as victims of the mass slaying and placed on an official task force list for ongoing investigation. The group included 25 children and 5 young adults. Children ages ranged from 7 to 17, young adults 18 to 28. On June 21st of 1981, a suspect, Wayne B. Williams, was apprehended near the Chattahoochee River, a dumping ground for many of the victims. Williams was subsequently charged for the murder of the 2 adults, Jimmy Ray Payne, 21, and Nathaniel Cater, 27, and convicted on both counts following a 9-week trial during the first part of 1982. The books have been closed on cases that have indeed not been prosecuted, with an understanding that they all can be linked to Wayne Williams without the benefit of a trial by jury. There is no precedent for this procedure in court history. The provision to establish a pattern and make all cases fit in a mold in view of the critical nature of the case is indeed an unfit decision. If anything, a pattern having been established should be used merely as a point of departure for a trial by jury in each and every case. To date, there has been no attempt to learn the identity of the mass murderers of our children. For this reason, we are concerned that we may never know the circumstances surrounding our children's deaths. Questions abound in every area of the situation. Essentially, Mr. Reynolds, I believe that the civil rights of the children and parents have been violated for the following reasons. Number 1, testimony given by Mr. A, and of course these are redacted. They're listing them by alphabetical letters instead of by their names. So Mr. A white male witness who alleges that the other white persons have bragged to him about killing them damn niggers. I am in possession of taped recordings detailing the contents of his testimony. And number 2, testimony given by Mrs. B, a white female witnesses who reports that an acquaintance is killing the children to hide his homosexual activity with the boys. Miss B has detailed her observations in a written report and submitted it to me. Number 3, testimony given by Mr. C, a young black male, 16, whom I consider a survivor because of his narrow escape with death. Mr. C describes his homosexual prostitution activities with white males in Northside Atlanta. His tape-recorded testimony describes the activities of a club of members, which included 2 of the victims. Number 4, parents were subject to indecent and indifferent treatment by police officials at every level of the crisis, i.e. delayed action early on, insensitive and improper police procedures, all of which were tolerated because victims were black and not white. Number 5, in many instances, citizens desiring to offer information were either discouraged or ignored in their attempt to cooperate with investigative authorities. Even parents' offer of information was often ignored or simply refused. The court's failure to issue subpoena to persons known to have had continuous contact with many victims based on eyewitness accounts, as opposed to fiber evidence, is also contrary to proper judicial procedure. As a matter of information, court documents, depositions, and other testimony provided identities of such persons. So that's all really sounds to me like what my client has suffered, where they suppressed whatever it is that they wanted to suppress and only allowed the information they wanted to go forward in the court case. And is that often your findings with these criminal cases, Nolan?
It depends on the case. I mean, it depends on the department too. Some departments have known to be crooked for years. For instance, L.A., New York.
Right.
Many of the big ones, I guess Atlanta, It's looking
Right,
like.
right. It's looking like it. It's right up there. But and I'm a little confused. So when I'm looking at my client's information where it says they specifically omitted and would not allow the jury to hear that the victim had been found half nude from the waist down and that there was sperm present with a tail, which we're now finding out is something means that sex had occurred within 12 hours if the tail was still intact on the sperm. But they were able to exclude all of that evidence from the jury ever hearing, which is exculpatory for my client, that he was not the one because they didn't even test that sperm when they should have. So is that normal protocol for them to just decide I didn't investigate that part of it? So of course we're just not going to allow the court to hear it.
I think they had an agenda. They didn't want to go there. So, but also just a side point is that these do involve sex and homosexual behavior, which Jack is not known for either of those things. But that doesn't mean he wasn't involved in the killing. He's known to be a killer. But again,
I haven't seen or read any instances of any sexual attacks on these children. So to my knowledge, I'm not aware of anybody having been sexually violated or sexually assaulted in these particular cases. And we're going back and forth. They're not just boys, they're boys and girls. I'm pretty sure the 8-year-old.
They didn't prosecute them, so none of that information, some of it came out, and there's allegations that there were sexual crimes, but none of them ever went to court, so all the evidence didn't come out.
Well, let's see what other evidence these parents have at this point. It goes on to say that the following discussion attempts to elaborate on the reasons listed above. Mr. A white male witness, on August 14th of 1982, at his request, I visited the home of a middle-aged white male in Atlanta, hereafter referred to as Mr. A, who gave a comprehensive accounting of the implementation of a calculated plan by whites to kill the black children. An excerpt from that conversation follows. Question, Mr. A, you said that you thought you wife and your wife. I love it when they can't type. And your wife, mother, hated the fact that your sons, who are white, went to school and played with the colored boys. Do you think that could be a serious motive, racism, prejudice for your family to take the lives of Atlanta's black children? His answer, yes, ma'am, sure do. I mean, let me put it this way. They say the South down here, the white people, the colored people, and all, Lincoln freed the slaves, you know. Well, they say that everybody is happy and living together, but there's still a lot of old folks, white old folks, don't feel that way. And her mother, wife's mother, was one of those ones. Every morning, wife's mother, would come over here and have a cup of coffee with us before she went to work. And she was constantly every morning pouring that garbage in my kids' heads. She didn't talk about the specific boy. She didn't know one specific boy. She just excuse my French. She said, them damn niggers running over everybody. They were going to school with them down here at Benteen, and them kids would get in fusses and fights just like any kids do, you know? But yet, just because they was black, they'd come home and tell their grandmother, and then she'd say, them damn little niggers, if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't have got in a fight like that. Constantly, every morning, she'd come over here, and it was end this and end that. Her daddy, when she was little, they was raised in Jonesboro, and he'd come up to Atlanta in horse and wagon about every 2 weeks. And he was up here when the Ku Klux was killing colored people and carrying them to the river in a wagon. And she was bragging to the youngins and all saying that that's what they ought to do again. At another taping in Mr. A's home, I know, right? Like, this is harsh thinking, I mean,
Gross.
At what point do people not have any care or concern for human life? At what point does the color of somebody's skin cause you to hate them so bad, not even knowing them, that you wish that they were being killed and dumped into a river? I mean, this is a nasty old lady, obviously.
Yes, no doubt. God.
At another taping in Mr. A's home, he reported, "My son was bragging and said that he killed the one that was stabbed in the stomach, the one that was found over there off Moreland." As a matter of information, Mr. A lives in a predominantly Black area of Atlanta, a resident of 15 years at that address. He is one of the few whites that has remained in his community despite the high incidence of white flight common to urban transition. Mr. A and his family, themselves being poor, lived a similar lifestyle as their Black neighbors. So here we have people that are in the same social status and background. They're just as poor as each other. And he's not hating these individuals. He continues to live in a society where most white people have left because they deem that inappropriate for themselves. Mr. A and his family, themselves being poor, lived in a similar lifestyle as their Black neighbors. His immediate family members, whom he accuses of mass murder, were frustrated by having to contend with their Black environment, despising their children's attendance at the Black school, their social life, the same boys club, the issues and fights at recreation centers, their forced joint involvement in every area of life. Their only escape was the frequent visits to relatives in Conyers, Georgia, who he accuses of providing the opportunity for murder through the use of their motorhome. Mr. A expresses strong familiarity with several victims by name. In fact, on my first visit to his home, accompanied by 2 parents, I was amazed at not only his knowledge of the children, but also the parents. He greeted us and upon recognizing Mrs. Annie Rogers, said, "Good evening, you're Miss Rogers, aren't you? Patrick Rogers was your boy." So, but that could simply mean he's following the news, you know? I mean, I would think that these people.
It sounds like a lot of inside information. Why didn't anyone follow up on that stuff?
Exactly, and that's why this senator is, or that the representative is actually sending this letter off. So it says Mr. A claims to have an understanding of the route used by his family and the placement of the bodies. He says that his relative's motorhome was used to drop bodies in the Chattahoochee River from the side door of the vehicle, and number 2, circle the perimeter on the ground route that was used by him, Mr. A, and his wife in their employment with the Dillard Mumford Easy Food Shops, aka Magic Markets, he says. He says, well, there's one route coming up 20 from Conyers going around 285 that was stopping at Moreland Avenue down there at 285 where there was transporting the kids from a car to the motorhome. They was going on around 285 and getting off at 166 and Campbell Run Road, which they're both the same street, and then turn left going to Fairburn Road and taking another left and going down Red Wine Road, which is approximately 3 miles from the Easy Food Shop at Fairburn and Campbellton. This compelling and vivid account of hate murders as described by Mr. A clearly violates the very same protection as established by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Despite its potential for providing answers to the most heinous mass murders in the history of this country, Mr. A's testimony was ignored and doors were closed to him at every level of law enforcement. It is questionable whether his testimony would have been denied if 30 whites had been slain instead of 30 blacks. Mrs. B, a white female witness, through a mutual acquaintance, I met Miss B and her husband who report a number of experiences surrounding a suspect who they believe to have young Black boys in homosexual trysts. She believes her life to be in danger because of the suspect is aware of her suspicion. Her testimony, however, does not put the suspect with any of the victims. Mr. C, let's see. A young Black male, 16, is a young man not retarded but slow in some ways who reports that he is part of a group of youngsters who engage in homosexual prostitution. He expresses a disgust at his involvement and an interest in getting out. His friend, however, in an effort to get out, was assaulted by fellow members of the homosexual club, and because of this, Mr. C fears that he too will be hurt. Mr. C does, in fact, link 2 child victims as former members of the club who accompanied him on many occasions on jobs. But that's still a very minute portion of the children that are participating in this particular club. And
right, and those are the older ones. Those weren't the younger ones. Yeah,
right. So I feel like
ones weren't sexually assaulted, though.
I feel like we could almost even separate the young adults from the children, because this was a hit at the children, and they said Black boys. They were referring to children in the suspect's letter. So maybe the young adults could be that 7 or so that was referred back to local jurisdictions. That's what I'd have to know, is which 7 were referred back and not clumped onto or not known by Wayne Williams. And is that 7 the young adults? Is that children, girls, boys? What is that 7?
I don't know, but I think part of why Wayne Williams was linked is because I think he's gay.
Well, gay, and then Harriet was stating that he also ran kind of this. He did what we would refer to as our podcast today, but way back then in the 1970s and 80s, yeah, he was doing interviews with things like Bob Crane and other people, right, Harriet?
Yeah, he was doing a lot, and he was trying to get together some groups to be the new Jackson 5. So he had a lot of excitement going on with the local kids.
It's kind of an impresario.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then there's the involvement with Disney. If you go back to the 70s, you have Rodney Allen Rippey, the cute kid that was the Burger King commercial kid. Then you have, what's his name? Who was it? Different Strokes. There was a lot of push to get
Manuel.
Yeah.
What's his name? Manuel.
Oh, that too. But no, there was a push to
Manuel
find
Lewis,
cute, adorable, and Manuel Lewis was one of them.
Oh, Gary Coleman.
But, yeah. Well, Gary Coleman too. So there was a push to find these talented kids, and you got to put it into perspective. That's Atlanta right there, and they want to, there's a lot of talented kids there. So then this horrible sets of murders happen, and they're going after they're looking for a scapegoat.
Right.
So anyway, yeah.
All right, I'm going to try to blast through this. It looks like we've got maybe a minute or so here. So it says, parents cite reasons for civil rights violations. Parents cite a number of reasons why they believe their children's civil rights have been violated. The following comments describe their major concerns. Patrick Baltazar. Miss Sheila Baltazar questions the motivation of the task force, which directed her son Patrick to another department when he called for help. She is further perplexed since his name was officially on task force list and he gave his name and reported that he was being followed. This telephone call is part of the public record, which was aired on local television. So now we have a victim who ends up dead, who attempts to call in and says he believes he's being followed. So how... And the task force being made up by the FBI, I think this is why they're suggesting there's some type of a cover-up or something going on. So this kid is calling in to state that he is being followed and that he feels that his life's in danger. They slough him off onto another department, and then ultimately he ends up dead. Like, that's kind of disgusting. Joseph Jojo Bell. Miss Doris Bell believes... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, Joseph Jojo Bell, Miss Doris Bell believes that Wayne Williams did, in fact, kill her son and wonders why he cannot or will not be brought to trial for it. Basing her conclusion on testimony by siblings, she thinks that if the victims were white, Wayne Williams would be brought to trial for all victims connected to his pattern and tried for each. Alfred Evans. Miss Lois Evans questions the handling of her son's case during the period he was missing. The Atlanta police withheld from her the fact that her own son had been found by them and buried by them without her knowledge. Wow. Miss Evans, who had reported her son missing 14 months prior to this announcement, does not understand why law enforcement officials felt the need to deny her the opportunity to identify her son. That is absolutely mind-blowing. Found her son, buried her son, did not say a word to her. Absolutely insane. Well, I think that I'm going to have to stop here. I really had hoped that I would have made it through this letter and on to the next one. But as we know, nothing ever goes as quick as I assume it will. So is there anything that either of you would like to add?
No, just have a good weekend.
For Wayne Williams.
New trial for Wayne Williams. Well, reopen these cases. He was never actually convicted of these, so reopen these cases.
Exactly.
Yeah. If there's a new trial, it'd just be on the 2 people he may have killed, the 2 adults. So I think we just need to reopen the investigations to the children.
Right. He was found dumping those 2 adult bodies. Now, I don't know that means he killed them. He could have just been dumping them, but he was caught doing that. So in that sense, I don't think he should be retried for those particular 2 murders unless there's evidence that comes about that he can point a finger to somebody else who did the killings and he just disposed of the body. But as far as these are concerned, these cases need to be reopened. And I want everybody to have a wonderful weekend. We will catch you next Friday. Thank you all for being here. Take care, and thank you, Nolan and Harriet.
Bye.
Bye-bye.